Hello, in today's video we're going to learn how to make a histogram using the Casio calculator. We're going to look at two different ways that we can do this process, and let's get started. So the first thing is we're going to go into our menu, and in the menu we're going to select the second option, which is the one that says stat for statistics. Okay, and here I already have the frequency table. Okay, so in the previous video we learned how to make the frequency table using our calculator, and this is the frequency table for the case study that we've been using as an example, which is the number of marks that you guys obtained for the workshop of last term. So we have here the lower boundary, the upper boundary, the class mark, and the frequency. So if you remember, the first class goes from 0 to 3. It has a class mark of 1.5 and a frequency of 22. The second class goes from 3 to 6, and nobody was in this class. The third class goes from 6 to 9, and also there wasn't anybody in this class. The fourth class goes from 9 to 12. It had a class mark of 10.5 and the frequency was 5, okay, and so on. Okay, so this is the data that we've been using for the past few videos. Now, to make the histogram, the first thing we're going to have to do is click on the graph option. Okay, so we're going to do that by selecting F1. Now we need to change some of the settings in the graph, and to do that we're going to click on set. Okay, and the set is F6, so we're going to go ahead and click on that, and you should see this menu. Okay, so we're going to change graph 1, which is the one that we have here, graph 1. The first thing is the option graph type. Now the default is set to scatter, and we're going to have to change that to histogram. So to do that, we're going to click on the right arrow by clicking on F6, and we're going to select hist here, which is the histogram option, by pressing F1. Okay, there we go. So now we have the histogram graph type. Now for the X list, we're going to select the lower boundary. Okay, and if we look at our frequency table, the lower boundary is list 1. So on the X list, we have list 1. If you have something different, you can go ahead and click on list and then select the number of the list, which is 1. Okay, now for frequency we have 1, but if we look at our frequency table, we have that the frequency is list 4. So we go back to set, and for the frequency I'm going to click on list, and we're going to select list 4. Okay, now we're ready to look at the histogram. So the way to see it is to click on graph 1. We're going to start it at 0, and the width is going to be 3. If you remember from the frequency table, the width was 3. Alright, and then we can click on execute to draw it, and there it is. So this is the histogram for our frequency table. Alright, and we have the first group had a frequency of 22, then the next two groups had a frequency of 0, and then after that I think we had a frequency of 5. Alright, but if we want to check those numbers, then what we can do is click on shift and then trace by clicking F1, and you'll see the frequencies here. Okay, F equals 22, so the frequency is 22 for the first class interval. For the second class interval, we have a frequency of 0. For the third, we have a frequency of 0 again, and then we have 5, 11, 10, 25, and 7. Okay, if we look at our frequency table, Those are the frequencies that we have for the different class intervals. Okay, so that was the first method. There's one more thing that I want to show you. Notice that we should always have labels for our axes, and in this case the calculator is not showing any labels. So the way that we can fix that is to go into Shift, Setup, and go down to the option that says Label and just turn it on. We can exit, and then when we look at the graph again, it'll have the Y and the X label that your graphs should always have labels for the axes. Okay, so that was the first method. Now let's look at the second method. So for the second method, we don't have a frequency table, we have the raw data. So we have the score, and I have all the scores. Okay, so remember there was 80 students, so I have 80 different scores. So on your calculator for the second method, you would need to copy all of the data points onto your calculator, okay? And you have to be careful with it not to make a mistake, because if you make a mistake, then you might get some results that are incorrect. Okay, so I have all the different data points. Okay, so what we need to change is a couple of the settings for the calculator. So again, we're going to go into Graph by clicking F1, and then we're going to click on Set to change the settings. Okay, so these are the settings for the first method. So what I'm going to do is just look at Graph 2 by clicking F2, and I'm going to change the settings in Graph 2. All right, so the first thing is that we don't want a scatter diagram, we want a histogram. So we're going to again click on the histogram option. Now for the X list, we're going to use list 1, which is the list where we have all the different data points. And for the frequency, you see that it has a number 1, and we're going to leave it like that. Okay, so what that means is that the calculator is going to count each number 1 time. That's what that means. Okay, and then to look at the histogram itself, we're going to go back to the lists and click on Graph 2, F2. All right, the starting point again is 0, the width is 3, and we're going to execute. There it is. Okay, same deal. If I want to look at the values, I can again go Shift and Trace, and there you see 22, 0, 0, 5, 11, 10, 25, and 7. So it works exactly the same way. But the interesting part about the second method is that you can use it to build the frequency table. Okay, because notice that the calculator is counting the values to build each bar for each class interval. So if you have a list of data points and you have to build a frequency table, then all you have to do is go to your calculator, input all of your data, and then do a histogram, and with this in the Shift Trace, you're going to be able to look at the frequencies, and the calculator does the job of counting for you. Okay, so this is the second method for building the histogram. That's it for this video. Until next time.